Hello, everybody. You're very welcome to the I'm Here Connect series today on Thrive Through Menopause. And I do notice that we have a good few of our clients here today. We've got CISC, Fáilte, CORE, Western Postform, TLI, and also I see some friends from Ogilvy as well. I also want to welcome our panelists, Loretta Dignam, founder of the Menopause Hub, the dedicated menopause hub here in Ireland, and also Dorcas Story, Associated Trainer for Ireland at Henpicked, Menopause in the Workplace. I also want to thank Catherine O'Keefe from the Wellness Warrior for her input into the research into today as well. And a special thanks actually to a man in our audience today, Richie Butler from CISC & Sons, which is a construction company, male dominated, but I just wanted to praise him in particular for really driving the company vision around diversity and inclusion. And when it comes to anything that's gender-based and equality, it's important that everybody is part of the conversation so that we all create a solution for society in itself. I'm Caroline Clark. I'm Managing Director for Europe for I Am Here. And for those of us who don't know us, we are a cultural change movement in the workplace and schools as of 2 weeks' time, where we embed the belief that it's okay not to feel okay, and it's absolutely okay to ask for help. And we achieve this through customized and a systematic approach with every client. And ultimately what we are doing is increasing both help giving and help seeking behaviors with our clients and our children, and driving positive cultural change around mental health and well-being. At I'm Here, we recognize that all of us struggle at some stage of our lives, and our struggles are unique to all of us. And what we like to do is shine a light on support across all well-being pillars to enable us easy and speedy access. And one of the ways we do that is through the I'm Here Connect series that we're on today. Menopause impacts all women across the globe and their support system as well. Menopause impacts our mental, physical, and social pillars of our well-being, and that is why we're here today. Today is about empowerment. We want women, employers, managers, and partners to walk away with a better sense of menopause and how we can support women throughout this time. We also want women to think of menopause as a time of renewal. And actually, when we're doing the research there, that's actually what they call it in Japan. And that's what I'm going with. If we can inspire, inform, and empower women and their support system, then menopause can be managed and we can all set ourselves up for a long and thriving life. So getting into it then, I want to thank all of you in particular for coming today, and those who actually filled out a questionnaire, because I think myself, Loretta, and Dorcas were keen to cover the topics that you wanted us to cover. So apart from the symptoms, there was a really a clear desire on how we approach menopause in the workplace and how we create that support system for women. We also have some individual questions, some of which we'll go through today. Just before we start, some elements of today may trigger you, particularly if we're talking about the mental health impact of the menopause. And if that's the case, please do reach out for support. Aisling is going to put in the Super Ambassadors that I Am Here address into the chat box should any of you need support either during or after the session today. Please do use the chat box for questions. This is your time. This is about you gaining knowledge. So, and if we don't respond to them all immediately, we'll try and cover them when we're talking about the topics. And just to note as well that every woman is different and with your own medical history. So it would be difficult for us to answer any medical questions, and we would advise that you talk to a consultant. We also have some hashtags that you can use as well. Hashtag Thrive Through Menopause, hashtag I Am Here Tribe, and also Pulse Learning. So Aisling will put that in. So turning to Loretta and Dorcas, you're very welcome. You both have had a long, successful careers in other fields. And actually, Loretta and I worked together many moons ago in Diageo, and then was also a client of mine. And also, Dorcas, you've had your own journey as well, and we crossed paths in a recent business endeavor as well. So maybe you could just tell the audience in terms of your journey and how you've transformed your careers to focus on menopause. So maybe Loretta, you could go first.
Thanks a million, Carol Ann, and thanks for everybody for showing up today. I hope you benefited hugely from this. To be honest, I wish there'd been these kind of things when I started off on my menopause journey. It would have made life a lot simpler. So my background is I've worked in major multinationals, the corporate sector internationally in Ireland. I've worked at Mars, Diageo, Kerry Group, all big, great names. And I was working, I'm on the board of the Abbey Theatre for about 6 years. I've just stepped down, and I chaired their Gender Equality Committee. And I guess I saw the power of policy change there, and that sort of got me thinking about what other things I could do. So a month before I turned 50, my period stopped, and I didn't realize that was forever. And very soon afterwards, I started having hot flushes. So I'd have maybe 20 or 30 hot flushes a day. I'd have them at night. My duvet was on, duvet was off. So basically, this is the beginning. And the only two things I knew about menopause were hot flushes and no periods. So hey ho, I was menopausal. And just turning 50, I thought I was way too young for this kind of nonsense, really. Anyway, I went to my GP after about 3 years of putting up with awful symptoms, but not as awful as some of the women that I meet and hear from. And I went to the GP. I tried everything natural under the sun, including magnets in my underwear that you can buy for Boots. And I've got a secondhand set to sell you, barely worn. And the only thing that happened really was that when I went into the supermarket, the chain from the trolley that you used to put your money in stuck to my middle, or the wire basket, and it was like, whoom. And anyway, the hot flushes still remained. So I usually keep my little magnet as a reminder of the olden days. Anyway, I tried everything natural under the sun, was terrified of HRT, but with no information on anything, actually. And I would consider myself to be reasonably well educated, reasonably intelligent, and yet I knew nothing. So I went to my GP, as I said, after 3 years, and she went, no periods, hot flushes, you're menopausal. And she talked to me about what I might take. And if she'd asked me a few more questions, she wouldn't have prescribed the HRT that she did. But that was at the start of the journey. I then, after a few months, realized that wasn't for me. And I sought a consultation with somebody who was much more kind of experienced. It was very in-depth. It was over an hour. It was very expensive. But I left knowing so much more about menopause than when I went in. And I heard the word perimenopause, which happens, in the period leading up to menopause, which I'd known nothing about either. And when I look back in my 40s, I realize all the different things that I'd gone through, all the medical appointments I went to. I had, brain scan for headaches, sent to the eye and ear emergency department 3 times for dry eye. I mean, the list goes on. Anyhow, to cut a long story short, I was talking to a woman who was turning 60 that weekend. She picked up a menu in the old Bewley's Cafe, and basically I thought she was going to faint, but she said no, it was just a hot flush. And I couldn't believe it, 60 years of age, 10 years after she'd started these hot flushes, she was still going through this, had never sought help. So on that day, I decided I'm going to do something about this, practical for women. So I opened up, I did research, and then I opened up the Menopause Hub, Ireland's first dedicated multidisciplinary menopause clinic. Hard to believe that nothing existed prior to that. And so that opened in December 2018. We have been inundated. So we have medical doctors, gynecologists, and GPs. We've got a psychologist, because CBT is very effective for women going through menopause. We have a dietitian and nutritionist who specialize in menopause, and we have a women's health physio, so pelvic floor work is really important, and we have an acupuncturist. So there's a range of services there for women. In addition to that, the other arm of the business that we're developing, or have been developing over the last few years, is the whole menopause and the workplace piece. So that's why I'm delighted to be here, Carol Ann, talking to you. So that's my story. I just 2 little facts. One is that the average age of menopause in the 1900s was 47. The average life expectancy was 49. In Ireland now, the average age of menopause is 51, perimenopause 45. and the average life expectancy now is 84 years. So I will be living a third to half of my life post-menopausal, and therefore, given that I feel very active and very alive, I'd like to live that in my best health. So our values as Menopause Hub are education, empathy, and empowerment. And really, if there's anything that happens out of today, is that women are empowered to choose how to manage their menopause and know more about it, plus how to get support or seek support in the workplace.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, Loretta, thanks for that, you know, because I've obviously done a lot of research into this myself, because I think I've been in complete denial for the last 10 years. And I know I'm not alone. I think I talked to many women just because of the social image of menopause. And that's why we're rebranding it as a time of renewal. But just touching on your point there around the fact, you know, that post-menopause piece, which is the rest of our lives effectively, and how we approach menopause directly impacts on how we live our lives, particularly to avoiding things like dementia and or Alzheimer's, which is one of the two top killers for women. I'm going to move on to Dorcas now in a second, but I love the fact that we're bringing a little bit of humor into this, and thanks, Loretta, for sharing that story, because I think, again, we take this topic very seriously, but this happens to every woman, and of course we have funny stories. I mean, I was only sharing one this morning where I actually started on HRT at the weekend and the blooming patch fell off, and now I had to put it on, and I couldn't find it anywhere, and I had the kids looking for the patch as well. So, you know, there's lots of stories that we can share with one another to kind of bring that kind of sense of relief to what we're experiencing as well. So Dorcas, over to yourself. We'd love to hear about your journey as well. I mean, you have a fantastic career behind you, particularly I know you from the nutrition side of things. So what prompted you to kind of make that move or that shift into this area?
Okay, well, as you said, I was working in nutrition and food, and I was running healthy eating events in the workplace. So I was already in that kind of, you know, workplace, just running events, well-being events. And I actually started then expanding into mental health as well. And I trained as a meditation coach. Because, you know, when you're working with people about food all the time, you begin to then realize that food can only ever go so far. No matter how good your diet is, you know, our stress levels and how we feel is huge impact on our well-being as well. But I just decided to go back to college and do a master's. And I stepped out of that space and went back to do a master's in occupational health psychology. And that was around a time in my life where I was going through a lot of changes, and also menopause hit at 100 miles an hour. But I didn't realize what it was. So, you know, again, it's the same story. You hear this from people over and over and over. Sometimes we're so close to what's happening, we don't realize. Like Loretta and like you, you know, you hear about hot flushes. My mom and you know, her sisters were always going on about tropical moments. But apart from that, you know, I really knew absolutely nothing. And I wanted, you know, because of my background and everything, I wanted to try and do a natural, you know, approach as much as possible. But it was actually a friend of mine in the States who I was talking to her one day, and she said, I think you better go and get your hormones checked. And she said, what you're talking to me about sounds really hormonal. And it was like, I was too close to it. I just didn't see it. So I like that. I tried to find a natural approach, went to a doctor who specialized in this area. I did start off choosing to go on to natural HRT. But unfortunately in this country, the provision is just not there. And it just became, you know, just not possible for me. But you know, there's lots of changes in HRT now. It has come a very long way. So, you know, I looked at all of those options. I made decisions around that, which was best for me. I looked at lifestyle changes as well. Lifestyle changes make a massive difference. I started tracking my symptoms and seeing the patterns of when the symptoms got worse. And then finding some natural supplements that helped with the kind of little day irritating things like Loretta, you were saying about the dry eyes, you know, supplements that helped with that, supplements that helped even down to, you know, magnesium bath at night to help to sleep, you know, just finding all of these little things, you know, medical, lifestyle, and just putting it all together. As I was going through all of that, I had to come up with a topic for my research project for my master's in occupational health psychology. And because of what I was going through, I chose menopause. So I did a series of interviews with women in the workplace in Dublin to find out what the issues were. It was really an investigative piece because even though we have lots of research, it's all UK based. And we tend to, in Ireland, you know, take that as being the same as Ireland. And it just isn't, because we have a completely different provision. We have a completely different system. And also, they're kind of ahead of us in the UK. They're further down the road in terms of awareness and what workplaces are doing. So that research was very sobering. The results that I got back and the information from the women I spoke to, when I finished my master's, I was, what do I want to do? And I just decided, no, I want to be part of this solution. And so I looked around and I started working with Henpicked because I was just really impressed with what they do and how they help organizations. And I started working with them last October. So, yeah.
Brilliant. And a couple of things just to pick up on there. I love the way you talk about that sometimes we're so close to it, we don't see it. It's a bit like PMT. It's only when you come out the other side that you kind of go, oh, that's why I was like that. And my husband said to me recently, he said, Jesus, you seem a little bit snappy at the moment, like you're just ready to pounce. And I just said, well, you better strap in because I'm going through the perimenopause, moving into the menopause. So, you know, it's going to get worse. But joking aside, you know, the symptoms, like that's only one element of it. And I think when I was doing my research, and I'd love some thoughts from yourselves as well, and maybe some guidance to the audience as well, is that, you know, you mentioned it, Loretta, around the stages of menopause, but when it comes to the symptoms themselves, like one of the facts that I found interesting was that 1 in 4 women don't experience, you know, symptoms. 1 in 4 have extreme symptoms, and then 3 out of 4 have medium to light symptoms, which I was like, well, that's actually very positive statistics for me, because I'm hoping to be well, certainly not going to be the 1 in 4 because I already have symptoms, but certainly that 3 out of 4. But, you know, you've both mentioned around, you know, the hot flushes and kind of the common ones. But one of the things that I found really interesting is that there's so many symptoms, and obviously we break them down into kind of the mental, emotional, physical, and genitourinary. I can never say that word.
Genitourinary.
Yeah, thank you. What really surprised me the most was the mental and emotional impact, particularly in perimenopause and moving into menopause, around anxiety and depression, and also memory loss as well. And that they were actually the questions that came back the most from the group here today in terms of that, the mental health impact of menopause. So maybe you could just talk to us a little bit more around that.
Yeah, I mean, just 2 things. One is that, you know, menopause is like puberty in reverse. Can you imagine? So particularly for a girl going through puberty, is the estrogen is flooding into the body and it touches almost every cell. And if it doesn't talk to that cell, if it doesn't touch that cell, it talks to that cell. We wouldn't dream of not preparing our children for puberty. We would not dream of preparing ourselves for our children's puberty. And a lot of emphasis goes into that in schools and in the home. And yet this is another seismic event, particularly, well, for women, where basically what happens is that during the perimenopause phase, which is in the lead up to the kind of the end of the periods, if you could imagine, it's a bit like the oil in the engine. So the estrogen is a bit like the oil in the engine. And really, when that oil is depleting, because that's what's happening, the car starts to stutter and things start to go wrong. And then what can happen is it can be ups and downs like that, and surges of hormones and so on, before you actually reach the postmenopause stage, when the periods actually stop. So it's estrogen is that's primarily important. But as I said there, it touches every cell, or has a conversation with every cell in the body. So the impact in terms of the symptoms are wide ranging. And we have at the Menopause Hub, I compiled from a patient perspective, if you like, a symptom checker, which has up to 40 different symptoms on it. And I divided them into those blocks so that women could very easily have a look and join the dots about what's happening with their body. And so the thing that surprised me, because I didn't suffer with very many of the mental, emotional ones. I did have brain fog. I did have, concentration lapses. My confidence would have been impacted, but I didn't have anxiety or depression or panic attacks or the mood swings that a lot of women would report. And for some women, this is the first time in their lives that this has ever happened. So a lot of women would tell us that they feel they're going mad, and they just don't know what's happening. And because the famous two of no periods, hot flushes, maybe in loss of libido and being grumpy or something, they're the only ones that people know about. So therefore, women don't associate these symptoms. And it can be very frightening. And so the anxiety and the mood and the depression and so on is one aspect. Then if you talk about going into the workplace and you're talking about, if you have a job where you've got focus on detail and you're having lapses of concentration, where you need to remember detail and you've got memory loss, and you have this brain fog, which is kind of like cotton wool in your head, can really impact on your performance. And the other area that's very big is obviously sleep disturbance. And that can be from hot flushes, or generally women talk about, they find it easy to get to sleep, but then they're awake half the night, they're awake at 4 and 4 onwards. And that impact on sleep also impacts the entire body. So that's another symptom that comes up very strongly with women. But I think the key ones of, this worry about what's actually happening. And women would think, they're going mad. They also think that because of this brain fog and this kind of forgetfulness and memory loss, is that potentially they're heading into early Alzheimer's. And I've spoken with some of the people in the Alzheimer's area, and they see a lot of women presenting in either perimenopause or postmenopause with this. So that can be frightening in its own way. But what the latest research has said is that these symptoms, and people have heard of, sort of baby brain when you're pregnant, different things that happen because of hormones, PMT, how it can impact your brain. Well, it's the same thing in menopause, and estrogen does impact the brain. But what the latest research is that some of the disruption that happens during perimenopause can reverse itself post-menopausal. So it can get better once you move on. And obviously, if you're taking hormones through hormone replacement therapy, that can also impact and improve the status for women. But yeah, and I would just say to you that in the research that I've done, 80% of women are unprepared for menopause. 66% know little or nothing about menopause. I knew hot flushes and no periods. So that was probably the extent of my knowledge, which is really minimal. So that's the big thing, is about being, trying to educate ourselves about it. But the symptom checker certainly lets you see it all on a page and helps join the dots, which women don't, and often their GPs don't either.
No, I think that's a really good point, because I even think about myself, and a little bit like with I Am Here, because I work in mental health and wellbeing now, I kind of disclose my own journey. But I was on medication back in 2013-15 for burnout and anxiety, and unfortunately I had to go back on them again. It's nearly 2 years now, but it felt different this time, because I had all my coping mechanisms set up. I had done all the work, and it definitely felt different. And I said it to my GP, and clearly it was probably, I won't definitively, but it must have been partly to do with perimenopause. And then the treatment of that's very important. So it's done in tandem with other interventions as well. So I think that knowledge piece is really important. And Dorcas, just going to you just on the mental health side of things, and just within the workplace, because obviously you have that background in mental health. Is that one that you're seeing a lot in the workplace in terms of how to deal with that element of it, or does it tend to be quite mixed across all the different pillars?
It's actually changing, and it's really interesting. You know, the statistic that you were talking about, 3 in 4 women will have symptoms. That's actually the same statistic of women that say that their symptoms affect them in the workplace. 3 out of 4 will say that their symptoms affect them. And the top 5 symptoms that the research has previously shown us include things like fatigue and hot flushes, and then anxiety and lack of concentration. But in the last 1.5 to 2 years with COVID, well, 1.5 years now, that has actually started to change now, because with so many more women working from home, they have much more control over the physical symptoms. So can layer clothes, can change, open a door, ventilation, whatever heating temperature they can control. Whereas the isolation and the loneliness and the lack of contact with peers or co-workers that might be offering support is much lower. So what we found is that all the psychological symptoms are now much higher than the physical symptoms, because it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. I know that the statistics say that 50 to 70% of people want to carry on working at least partly from home. So this is something in the long term that we're going to have to look at. But just one interesting thing that I came across in my research, just on the subject of hot flushes, is that what I found is that hot flushes were not just a physical a symptom. They were also a huge trigger for psychological symptoms as well. Because what happens with women a lot is that they get so anxious that they're going for fear of getting a hot flush. And that can send them into a spin, absolutely. And I've heard stories of people hiding in toilets, of trying to change meeting times, call in sick or whatever, just because they were getting so anxious about this. And we do know as well with symptoms that there's a bi-directional relationship. So it isn't just about how our symptoms are affecting our workability, but there is also triggers in the workplace that make our symptoms worse as well. So we always have to look at these things from both directions, and particularly in that respect, if those systems are put in place to help somebody that they don't have to get anxious about their hot flushes, then the chances are that their experience of the hot flush will actually be lowered as well. So that was something that came up hugely in the research that I did. But there's a massive amount that we can do about all of those psychological and anxiety symptoms.
So that's
Caroline, sorry, can I just interrupt there for a second? Because I can remember giving presentations, and of course, I never told anyone I was going through the menopause at the time, and for a number of reasons. One is I was too embarrassed. 2, I didn't want people to know my age, and then if they knew my age, they'd consider me to be kind of over the hill and an owl type of thing, and I didn't want that. And the reality of it is that people can guess your age, give or take 5 years. So what I do, I can remember making presentations very seen to boards and whatever, and having a hot flush. And, they could be triggered by, hot drinks, by stress, by anxiety, by rushing, by, lots of different things. And I tried, I cut down on my alcohol intake, I cut down on my coffee, my tea, my hot drinks. I did all those things, but and I wore my magnets, and it still didn't help. But I can remember making presentations and experiencing a hot flush. And it is this intense heat that goes right through your body, and you can't get your clothes off quick enough. But obviously I didn't take my clothes off. And then you could feel I could feel the kind of the perspiration or whatever on the ends of my follicles of my hair. And my makeup would be kind of sliding off. And I'm trying to make a presentation. So I'm knocked off stride, wondering what everyone else is thinking. How do I appear? And no wonder one's confidence gets impacted and knocked. And that's the hot flush, without feeling the fatigue that I felt, which I described as a slow puncture. So if you add all of those things in, it can be a very trying time for women, and then trying to hide it as well, you know, kind of adds to, as you said, the anxiety, the fear, the whatever around it.
Yeah. And that's a lovely segue into what women can do about it. Because, you know, you mentioned it at the start, Loretta, just around HRT. You know, when I mentioned it to my mum, oh, you can't be going on that. And as you said, it's become, you know, much more accessible, and they've innovated as well. But, you know, a good few questions came in around that kind of HRT or holistic. I know for myself, I've been on a number of supplements for the last probably 6 years, and we're all individual, just to go back to that point, but there are several supplements that we can all take to enhance our well-being during that journey. And then it's about having a choice and being informed around kind of the treatments that are out there that might be relevant to you. So maybe if you could just both talk a little bit around kind of the HRT versus holistic, what your views are. If you're happy to share your own stories, please do. But I think just to give the audience a sense of what they can do for themselves.
Do you want me to start? So basically what happened was in 2002, there was a big study done in the States called the Women's Health Initiative. And that was done to test was if HRT could prevent heart disease, stroke, and so on in women. And the average age of the woman in that piece of research was 63. A lot of them were obese, had pre-existing conditions, medical conditions, were smokers, etc., etc. So, however, what came out from that, and the research wasn't peer reviewed in advance, but what came out was these scary headlines across the globe that HRT was bad for you, could cause stroke, heart attack, give you breast cancer, etc., etc. And to be honest with you, it was the worst thing that could have happened to HRT. And the authors of that research have since come out and apologized that it had the negative impact that it had. But of course, you know, newspapers like big scary headlines, and they don't really like positive news. So that doesn't really get the airtime that is required. So as a result, women overnight stopped HRT, as did GPs, and doctors stopped prescribing. So it took from then until 2015 till the NICE international guidelines came out, which would actually said that HRT is the most effective treatment for most women for menopausal symptoms. Yes, it has risks, but the risks are much lower than you might think. So the risks, you have a greater risk of getting breast cancer by being overweight or obese, with a BMI of over 30, more than twice the risk you have of taking HRT. You also have a greater risk from drinking 2 units of alcohol a day or more, and that's a greater risk than taking HRT. So that damage was done. I myself, when it came to kind of approaching the menopause and whatever, was terrified of HRT. And all I had in my head was, oh yes, that's dangerous, can cause breast cancer and so on. So I'll be avoiding that. Now, I didn't look up the data. I didn't spend a lot of time researching it. And even when I went online, the data was so conflicting, but I was like, okay, I'm not taking it. So I tried all the things like sage, black cohosh, dong quai, and if you go into any health food store, they'll give you a list of those. There's things like Menopause, Menamin over the counter. There's phytosoya. There's all of those things that you can take that are menopause specific. But to be honest with you, what I found was that over time, my hormones were continuing to drop, and maybe the sage that worked for a couple of weeks for me stopped working, or the magnets worked for a week. Now, I don't know if that was a placebo effect, but they worked for a week and then they didn't. And so over time, and I did all the diet and lifestyle things that you could possibly do. I increased my exercise. I went to bed earlier, cut out the alcohol, cut out the hot drinks, cut down on sugary foods, took up meditation, you know, did everything that I could possibly do except touch HRT, but nothing improved my symptoms. Like, they just continued, and it was relentless. And I don't feel I suffered as badly as some other women, but for me, it was relentless. And I gave in and went to the GP. So to be honest, within a very short space of time, a month or so, my hot flushes were diminished. By the time I went back for my first review, my estrogen level was increased, and the hot flushes went completely. And then I went on testosterone. So I'm on 3 hormones, and they're called bioidentical, nature identical, or body identical. And these hormones are the most modern hormones available in the world. They're usually prescribed in Europe, but not in the US. The US really focus on what are called hormones made from pregnant mare's urine. So they would be in that area. Most of Europe would be in the more modern. And so they're called, as I said, bioidentical, body identical, nature identical, and they're made to mimic exactly the female hormones. And they're delivered primarily transdermally through the skin, so through gels, which I take, patches, which you're on, and creams. And so I started on estrogen separate to progesterone because I'm sensitive to progesterone, and I added in testosterone. And most people don't know anything about testosterone, but testosterone can be very important for some women. It can help not only with libido, but it can help with energy. It can help with va-va-voom, vitality, concentration, that kind of stuff. So I've been on those. And to be honest with you, within 6 months, all my symptoms were gone. And I fell back to my old self. And all I wished I'd known was, I wished I'd known about all of this in my 40s.
Yeah. I know, and it's really interesting to talk about the testosterone there, because I didn't know that we actually produce 4 times more testosterone than we do estrogen before we hit the menopause. So it's an incredibly important one, and also the timing of when you introduce it as part of your kind of your plan as well. Dorcas, over to you. I think you talked a lot about the lifestyle piece, and even when I was in talking to your doctor in the Menopause Hub, you know, I got a fright because I was kind of going, oh my God, I'm actually more likely to get breast cancer because the amount of wine I'm drinking. So I've actually cut my wine intake by half in the last 2 weeks because, you know, I recognized the damage I was doing. So maybe Dorcas, you could maybe pull up the lifestyle side of things. And we did get a lot of questions in around kind of the diet, nutrition, exercise piece. And again, it's very individual, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether you do or you don't decide to take HRT, the lifestyle, all of the different lifestyle elements are super important, and they can help as well. One resource that I'd really like to mention, because I think it's really good, is there is the patient arm of the British Menopause Society is called Women's Health Concern. And that is a fantastic resource for anybody to go on to have a look at educating themselves around HRT, because one of the consistent statistics that come up again and again and again is 70 to 75% of women don't feel they have enough information to make that choice. And there is no right or wrong choice. There's just a choice that's right for you. Whatever that may be. And that could be a mixture of different approaches, or it could be just one, whatever, you know, as you've already said, you know, everybody is different. There are no 2 women on the planet who will have the same experience of menopause. So that is really important to remember that. But the Women's Health Concern have a huge amount on their website of information around HRT that you can learn about, all the different types, of which there are, as Loretta said, many now, and it's constantly changing. All of the HRT that's now delivered through the skin transdermally is non-systemic, so it doesn't go through your body, so the risk is much lower. But they have a fantastic fact sheet which shows the comparative risks. So you were both mentioning about the wine, but it shows everything else. So all the normal risks that we would be used to hearing about, like exercise, or if you're a little bit overweight, all those more usual ones, it shows HRT in comparison to all of those risks. So it's a really good thing to signpost to people to have a look at, because it gives you a much more clearer picture of the reality of the risk involved. But then, you know, just in terms of the lifestyle approaches, then I'll go back to tracking symptoms again. You know, we've had clients who will say to us, I track my symptoms, I realize that My hot flushes were 10 times worse on a Friday, Saturday night. And you can guess why. So, sometimes it's just about making the choice, about saying, well, I'm not going to have any wine to drink on Friday night, but I'm going to have one glass on Saturday night, and I'm going to put up with the hot flushes. It's just about choice. But you feel in control. And this is what's really important. Just in terms of the other lifestyle choices as well, really important in terms of diet to up your antioxidant intake. And the easiest way to do that is eat by color. If you're eating a really colorful plate of food, don't get bogged down with any of the science. That's the super easy way to make sure. And just so, because a lot of people have heard the term antioxidant, but they don't understand what they actually do. And if you can imagine, when you put lemon juice on an apple, the apple stops browning because of the lemon juice. Well, that's what antioxidants do on your body, inside and out. So if you're eating lots of antioxidants, then you're really helping the cells in your body to perform at their best. And they really are anti-aging in that regard. So yeah, diet is really important. We would always say to people, exercise, yes, but it's more important to try to do something little every day. So whatever the little amount that you can do, that you incorporate into your routine, rather than going on a mad exercise, 1 or 2 hours, at the weekend or whatever. So that's really important. And stress is one of the biggest issues around menopause. And the reason for this is because particularly in postmenopause, once we go through that 1-day event of 12 months with no period, and you're then postmenopausal, as you said, for the rest of your life, the part of your body that produces the estrogen is the adrenal glands. But the adrenal glands are also the glands that produce the stress hormones, the cortisol. So if you're super stressed all the time, your body is going to straight away go to producing cortisol, and it's not going to be producing even the natural amount of estrogen that you would be producing. So stress is a huge, huge issue. So anything you can do to reduce the stress in your life, at work and at home, will really help. That's probably one of the biggest lifestyle issues, is reducing stress, and doing whatever you can do. It will make a massive difference to your symptoms and your experience, any negative experience that you're having throughout menopause. Reducing stress will make a big difference.
Brilliant. And a lovely segue, I think, into the workplace piece that people were really keen to talk about. So particularly thinking about alleviating the stress, because if you're in a stressful job anyway, and then you add in perimenopause, menopause, it can be very, very difficult for women. So maybe, Dorcas, you've been working in the workplace a good while. So are there any companies supporting women in the right way? Have you any examples of?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean, we've just awarded menopause friendly accreditation to HSBC Bank and also Marks and Spencers in the UK. Both are the two of the most recent companies. They've just done an amazing job of the work that they've done in the last 2 to 3 years. In very different areas within the workplace, and various different interventions, but overall the aim overall is to just bring menopause into the awareness, to make a conversation about menopause the same as a conversation about anything else, to make it everyday, to make it normal. That's what reduces the taboo. That's what reduces the stigma. I had 95% of participants in my research say that they would rather chew off their own arm than go and speak to their line manager. I mean, this was the biggest dread of all. So, what all of these companies are doing through various different means is they're creating this space where women feel completely comfortable to come forward and to say, this is what I'm experiencing, and this is the kind of help that I need. And this is not always a massive big thing. It doesn't have to be. One example that we always give in our training is about a woman working who was at a very high level, and she started to notice cognition issues. So she was really having memory loss and brain fog and everything. And the way she had worked with her manager previously was meeting in the corridor and exchanging busily bits of information. And all of a sudden she was finding she was getting back to her desk and she just couldn't remember what they had talked about. So for her, it was simply sitting down with her manager and saying, look, this is what's happening to me. This is what I'm experiencing. Can we stop talking in the corridor? Can we start, talking at my desk so I can write things down and I can record things? And that was all she needed. So it's a very good example of just showing that it doesn't always have to be a huge, big change or even something that costs a huge amount of money. Sometimes it can be something very small that can make a very big difference. Would you like me to kind of go through what those clients have done?
Yeah, I mean, that'd be very helpful. Yeah. Okay. For employers here today and managers.
Okay, great.
And I think just before you do that, I think you touched on it, that it doesn't have to be complex. It can be small things. And I think that's where I'm here is very relevant, because what we do, it doesn't matter whether it's menopause or any issues that people are facing, but really it's about empowering people with courage, confidence, and skills to have compassionate connections with each other. So we're supporting each other through learning, say, the clear skills of compassion, listening, empathy, acceptance, and being real. It doesn't have to be a big, complicated process. It's really about providing that safe environment where people feel they can express how they're feeling. I mean, I know with one of the clients, we have a laugh all the time, and they're all female, but I mean, we're in meetings and both of us have brain fog at the same time, but it makes for a very funny meeting, and it comes back eventually. But if you just, beyond that kind of compassionate connection piece around which, learning clear skills and looking after one another, what other things are our clients doing around policies or guidelines to address menopause?
Yeah, well, menopause policy is something that both of those clients have done, and lots of other clients are doing as well. And with menopause policy, it's really important not to take an off-the-shelf template. The more personalized the policy is for the organization, the more it matches the culture of that organization, the more effective it's going to be. So the more time that's taken to write that, it is very, very important for its effectiveness. Also, how is it communicated and how often is it communicated? All of this is really important. It really does need to be a living, breathing document that everybody knows it's there and everybody knows exactly where to find it and what it says. We've seen this time and time again, that the organizations that have taken the time to do that are the ones that have a policy that really makes a difference. And if you're not a large enough organization that you're at that, you can do a set of guidelines, but again, just that it matches the way that your organization works. So that would be definitely one thing that both of those organizations and many others have done. Another thing that they've all done is awareness training. This is vital. So on different levels, awareness training for colleagues, which is for everybody. And I know we've spoken in the past about the fact that menopause does not just affect 50% of the population, which you see repeated again and again. It affects everybody. We have a client, Southeastern Rail, who have an 80% male workforce, and their train drivers have to sign a form to say they had a good night's sleep the night before before they're allowed to drive a train. And one of their train drivers said, "I can't sign this. Have you ever slept beside a menopausal woman?" And on the basis of that, when they looked at the demographic of their workforce, they realized that he was by no means an isolated case. And so they delivered menopause training to all of their staff, with an 80% male workforce. It's really impressive. But menopause affects everybody. And so awareness training is really important for everybody. And then also specific line manager awareness training, because that is different. And one of the biggest problems that line managers have is the confidence that how do I approach a woman? How do I speak to a woman? I know I was saying about the women in my research being very reluctant to speak to their manager, but it also works the other way around. The research shows, and I hate saying this, but it's the truth. The research shows that most line managers are often male and younger, so they are as dreading a conversation about menopause as a woman might be approaching them. So the line managers don't need all of the detail with regards to, you know, the approaches and the HRT awareness and all of that. But what they do need is they do need to understand about what is best practice, what are all the legal requirements, you know, what has happened in terms of tribunals up until now, what do I need to do, and how do I need to approach this, and what is the best way that I can help somebody and support somebody, and even as simple as having that conversation. How do I have that conversation in a way that's not patronizing, that's not shutting somebody down, that's not, you know, that's not making life even more difficult for them. So manager awareness training, and then often we would do training with specific roles like HR. And then if an organization is large enough to have their own menopause champions or advocates we do training, carry out training around that as well, where we would help an organization to set up their own system so that they're able to deliver awareness training sessions themselves on an ongoing basis, you know, for the future. Because there will always be new staff who are coming up the line, who are, you know, who are reaching that stage. And it's human nature. We don't want to know about something if it doesn't affect us. So we kind of have blindsided until we get to that stage ourselves. So it is something that you do need to be delivering continuously. Then support groups. This could be as simple as, you know, getting everybody together for an expert presentation, something even online, you know, lunch and learn sessions. And it doesn't always have to be a menopause topic as such. As Loretta was saying earlier on, sleep is a big issue. So running a session on sleep with an expert, you know, opportunities for Q&A or suggestions or whatever, running related sessions, all of those clients that I mentioned have done that as well. And then also through the well-being, whatever well-being facility is available, to look in detail at the stress options. What's the provision? Is there an employee assistance program? That's something that can be really, really useful to touch in with whoever's providing that service and make sure that they're trained to deliver help and guidance and counselling for people with menopause issues, particularly the psychological ones. So they're all the kind of things that people would organizations would do and have done to make the necessary changes and to create.
So I think there's some very practical things that companies can do, you know, from the policies, guidelines, lunch and learn and all that. And I think from the human perspective, we know and I'm here that 70% of people don't look for help when they need help. And equally, we all want to help one another, but don't know what to do, particularly when it comes to mental health and well-being, or areas such as menopause and that, which impacts greatly on mental health. So really it's about providing that overall cultural shift as well, that people feel supported regardless of what the struggle is, and teaching people the skills of, like, what are the barriers to having those conversations and how do we move around those, and then how do we communicate through clear skills on that. So if anybody does want to become a tribe member of I'm Here, where you learn all those clear skills, understand those barriers to having those conversations, do go onto our website at www.imheretribe.com, and we'd be very happy for you to do the tribe members course. It's only 20 to 25 minutes of your time, but it'll be a life skill. Loretta,
could I just very quickly intervene, because I've just seen that somebody's come up with a question about female colleagues approaching their line managers, and I really would like to say this because it's such a huge thing. It comes up again. What a really, really simple way to try to approach this, for anybody who's in that situation, who's here today. First of all, empowering yourself and tracking your symptoms, so you're in control and you know. That will help have that conversation if you have that awareness, and then approaching it from the point of view of saying, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I've done myself already about it. And this is what would really make a difference to me. This is what would help me with both of us, like in the work situation, this is something that would make a big difference. And if you're delivering it very clearly like that, and you know what you need and you've thought about it, then you should have a much easier conversation with your line manager, and they will feel much more comfortable talking to you if you're showing that level of just understanding yourself of what's happening and what you need. So I hope that would help.
So Loretta, I know you probably like to add to this conversation, maybe also thinking around when you think about policy, like what does it look like? We've had some questions in around, should women have time off when they're going through the menopause? I know that in the UK, there's been some cases where, high court cases, and, they're looking to put menopause as a disability, which I personally would hate to see, but I would just love, in terms of policy piece, what does that look like to you? Where do you think we're going, I guess, in Ireland in this area?
Yeah, before I get into the policy bit, I just wanted to say a couple of things that we've been doing with organisations in Ireland, and I think this will resonate with anybody here from a HR or employer line manager perspective. And so I would agree with Dorcas with all of the different things she's talked about there. With Bank of Ireland, for example, as a customer or client of ours, they did menopause awareness training for staff generally, and there were some men and women on that. We also did training for their line managers and for HR that was more specific, and we did talk about policy development. We did talk about these tribunals and so on. But I do believe that, and that's a great place to start. What I would say, though, is that a lot of organisations have, in the Bank of Ireland, they call them reasonable adjustment passports. Another organisation I was speaking to this morning called them diversity passports. So they have these ways whereby you can request specific things to you that are reasonable adjustments within the organisation. So part of that line manager conversation might be, I'm looking for these reasonable adjustments. So that could be, if I'm experiencing hot flushes, I would prefer to sit near a window. I would prefer to have a fan, my own fan on my desk. I need to be maybe near the air conditioning, or if somebody has, sort of bleeding that they, would feel uncomfortable talking about, but they might say, look, I need access to a toilet regularly. If someone's on, so it's different if you're office-based versus if you're on a production line, or if you're in a warehouse, or if you're on a till at a retail outlet. So really it's about, what accommodations can help you as an individual, and how can the organisation help the person who needs this. So those adjustment arrangements are a very good way of doing it, to personalise it towards the woman. And the other thing I think is that by actually organize, so I think it's a push and pull kind of conversation, in the sense that organizations need to come out and say that they're menopause friendly. We're happy to embrace this, to discuss it, whatever. We're happy to work our way through this, and start maybe with the awareness training and so on. But that then will give, and if management are trained and HR, it's even better, but that would then give a signal or whatever to the employees that this may be a safe environment. So they would give the opportunity for that conversation to be brought up potentially. Now, admittedly, there's some women who say, look, I've battled my way to the top here in this career, through every glass ceiling and against every discrimination. I am not about to announce that I'm menopausal. I do not want any of this, etc., etc. And that is their prerogative. But I would say to organizations, what have you done around mental health? And I've been quoted in the Irish Times as saying, menopause where mental health was 10 years ago. And I know in organizations they're addressing some miscarriage, adoption, fertility, and other sort of areas. But the key thing is, what have you put in place maybe around mental health that would be particularly useful around menopause? All of it, some of it, but there'd be definitely, you're not reinventing the wheel here and starting with a blank page. So just to get on to your answer then, sorry, about policy. So organizations can look at adjusting their existing policies. So if you have a sickness policy or an absence policy, you could make it explicit that menopause is part of that. You can have or you can go to a full-blown menopause policy, and included in that would be some of those things around, so awareness training. You might even want to start off with a survey amongst your organization to kind of get a temperature check on, you know, menopause knowledge from management, HR, staff. You then might want to to do the awareness training that Dorcas talked about. You would also look at the management training. You look at reasonable adjustment passports. You would look at potentially ambassadors or champions, which, you know, organizations have for mental health. And then you would ultimately say, these are our policies around absence and around time off, etc. The women might need time off to go for medical appointments. They might like the flexibility of working hours by saying, you know, I've really had a very bad week of sleep. Would it be all right if I started work tomorrow later or whatever? Or I'm just exhausted and I need time off, or I can't come to work today because of X, Y, and Z. So that it's, you know, they're not ringing in saying I've stomach bug all the time. You know, and it's really, so it's multiple elements to it in order to create its own policy. But the key thing, and I would go back to what Dorcas has said, is if you don't communicate this, it just becomes another thing that sits on the shelf and, you know, doesn't really mean anything. It's just a box ticking exercise.
Yeah, and look, and I think I love the idea of the questionnaires and getting input from the women themselves. It's 14:59. So we've reached the end of the webinar. I think everybody will agree that it's a complex area. It's very detailed. We could talk about this for hours. If there is an appetite for us to do a session on a particular area, please do let us know. We'd be happy to discuss it and do a follow-up. I want to thank both Loretta and Dorcas for their time today and their expertise. I've certainly really enjoyed it. And every time I talk to both Loretta and Dorcas, I learned something new. So thank you for that. We'll be sending you both Loretta and Dorcas's details if you want to get in touch that can help your organization in this area. They are true gems, so do contact them. And we'll also be sending you some resources as well. And I just wanted to say as well, remember that knowledge is power. If you're struggling, seek support, particularly with your mental health. And remember the clear skills when you're, you know, in work as well: compassion, listening, empathy, acceptance, and being real. And I have invited you all to become tribe members, which will help those conversations, and you can all learn the clear skills and support one another in this journey. And if you want to contact me as well, I'm just Caroline Clark, caroline.clark@imheretribe.com. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll see you all at another date and time. All right. Thank you
for having us.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.